May 28, 1940, Reich Air Ministry, Berlin. Reich Marshal Hermann Göring set down the intelligence report with undisguised contempt. It detailed President Roosevelt's request to Congress for an unprecedented expansion of American aircraft production, a capacity to manufacture 50,000 planes annually. "The Americans are desperate if they believe such propaganda will frighten us," Göring told his staff. "They know nothing of war production. Let them try converting their automobile factories. They'll learn that building warplanes requires more than assembly lines." What Göring failed to grasp was that in Detroit, a Danish immigrant named William Knudsen was already proving him wrong. The former General Motors president, now working for $1 per year as Roosevelt's production chief, was orchestrating the most ambitious industrial transformation in human history. Within 4 years, American factories would produce nearly 100,000 planes annually while simultaneously supplying 2 theaters of war on opposite oceans, far exceeding the dismissed 50,000. The proclamation that triggered German contempt had come on May 16, 1940, as German panzers raced through France. Standing before Congress, Franklin Roosevelt declared, "I should like to see this nation geared up to the ability to turn out at least 50,000 planes a year." The reaction was skeptical, even among allies. In 1939, the United States had produced just 3,611 military aircraft, and the Army Air Corps possessed 1,700 combat planes, many obsolete. Yet Roosevelt demanded a 14-fold increase in production. Knudsen became the architect of this industrial miracle. When asked who could achieve such impossible production, presidential advisor Bernard Baruch replied, "First, Bill Knudsen. Second, Bill Knudsen. Third, Bill Knudsen." Abandoning his $300,000 salary, Knudsen brought automotive mass production principles to aircraft manufacturing. Transformation began immediately. By December 1941, American factories were producing 2,000 military aircraft monthly, a 20-fold increase in just 2 years. The Ford Motor Company announced plans for a massive bomber plant at Willow Run, Michigan. Boeing expanded its Seattle facilities, and Douglas Aircraft hired thousands of workers. The arsenal of democracy was awakening. Nazi leadership's dismissal of American capabilities stemmed from both racial prejudice and willful blindness. General Friedrich von Boedicher, the German military attaché in Washington from 1933 to 1941, sent accurate reports describing American mobilization. His December 1940 cable warned, "American war production will reach unimaginable heights." Berlin dismissed these warnings as defeatist exaggeration. When Boedicher met Hitler in February 1939 to discuss American potential, the Führer ranted about American racial degeneracy, rather than listening to intelligence assessments. Hitler proclaimed Americans half Judaized, half negrified, and incapable of sustained warfare. This ideological blindness would prove fatal. Prejudice permeated all levels. Luftwaffe intelligence dismissed reports of women entering aircraft factories as signs of American desperation. They could not conceive that democratic mobilization might exceed totalitarian command. Reports of factories running 3 shifts were assumed to be exaggeration. Ford's Willow Run plant embodied American ambition. Constructed on farmland beginning April 18, 1941, it became the world's largest factory under one roof, 3.5 million square feet, with an assembly line stretching a mile. Charles Sorensen, Ford's production chief, promised to build one B-24 Liberator bomber per hour, when other factories managed one per day. Initial results were catastrophic. The first bomber, completed in September 1942, required complete rebuilding. Quality control failures reached 50%. By February 1943, Willow Run produced just 56 bombers monthly against promised hundreds. Critics dubbed it, "Will it run?" Ford engineers persevered. They broke the B-24's 488,193 parts into manageable subassemblies, developed hydraulic riveting tools, prefabricated wiring harnesses, and moving assembly lines. They accommodated 578 design changes in 1943 alone while maintaining production. By mid-1943, German planners faced an uncomfortable reality. The United States had become an industrial juggernaut. Luftwaffe reconnaissance could locate bombers, but the pace of American replacement was relentless. Hitler's strategic focus remained misplaced. He obsessed over the Eastern Front while dismissing the Atlantic, underestimating the U.S. Navy's capacity to protect supply convoys. Meanwhile, American shipyards operated on a scale the Germans could barely imagine. Liberty ships, each 441 feet long, could be constructed in as little as 42 days by 1944. Mass production techniques borrowed from automotive assembly lines allowed shipyards to complete vessels in weeks rather than months. By June 1943, American yards were producing over 100 ships per month. In the air, the U.S. Army Air Forces pioneered long-range escort fighters. The P-51 Mustang, first delivered in late 1942, but by September 1943, monthly production reached 148 bombers. By December, 365. The breaker came in April 1944, when Willow Run produced 428 B-24s, one every 63 minutes, 24 hours a day. This single factory now outproduced the entire German aviation industry. German pilots first recognized American production superiority during the Tunisia campaign. Major Johannes Steinhoff, commanding JG-77, noted in December 1942, "The American pilots are no longer amateurs. Most disturbing, there are more of them every day." The revelation accelerated through 1943. On January 27, the first American raid on Germany struck Wilhelmshaven with 64 bombers. By October, during Black Thursday at Schweinfurt, the Americans could lose 60 B-17s and replace them within 2 weeks. The mathematics had become inescapable. Fully operational by 1943, extended bomber protection deep into German territory. Losses plummeted as bombers now had fighter cover for entire missions. German Flak and Luftwaffe interceptors became less effective, unable to match numbers or sustain losses. Behind the scenes, American logistics and planning excelled. Strategic bombing was coordinated with precision, using intelligence gathered from spies, reconnaissance photographers, and decrypted German communications. Every factory, rail line, and fuel depot became a target in the systematic degradation of German war-making capacity. The scale and sophistication of American operations confounded Nazi leadership, proving that industrial capacity could be as decisive as battlefield tactics. By late 1943, the cumulative impact of production, logistics, and manpower had shifted the balance. The Allies could replace losses, sustain multi-front operations, and maintain pressure. Germany, already stretched thin, could not keep pace. The seeds of defeat, planted by ideological blindness and the underestimation of American potential, were now fully visible. By early 1944, the Allies were ready to capitalize on their growing advantage. Planning for Operation Overlord, the invasion of Normandy, was underway. American and British forces coordinated massive logistical efforts. Ports were upgraded, supply stockpiles amassed, and troops trained for amphibious assaults. Lessons learned from earlier campaigns in North Africa and Italy emphasized deception, intelligence, and overwhelming firepower. Meanwhile, the Luftwaffe's situation deteriorated further. Fuel shortages grounded many aircraft, and pilot training could not keep pace with losses. Advanced Allied radar and code-breaking provided early warning of German deployments. The P-51 Mustang, now escorting nearly every bomber, ensured air superiority over Western Europe. German fighters, once feared, were now outnumbered and outmatched. On the ground, partisan movements in occupied Europe increasingly disrupted German supply lines. In France, the French resistance sabotaged railroads, communications, and bridges, slowing reinforcements and diverting German resources. Meanwhile, the Soviets, pressing from the east, forced the Wehrmacht to maintain stretched defensive lines. Germany faced the impossible task of fighting on multiple fronts, while losing control of vital resources. By spring 1944, the stage was set. American industrial might, combined with British planning, Soviet pressure, and resistance efforts in occupied territories, created an overwhelming Allied advantage. The German High Command became increasingly reactive, struggling to plug gaps rather than execute bold strategy. Hitler's insistence on personal command and ideological rigidity prevented effective adaptation. In effect, the war had reached a tipping point, and the Allies held the momentum. On June 6, 1944, the Allies launched Operation Overlord, famously known as D-Day. Nearly 156,000 troops from the United States, Britain, Canada, and other Allied nations stormed the beaches of Normandy under intense German fire. The landings were preceded by massive aerial and naval bombardments, as well as airborne drops behind enemy lines designed to sow confusion among German defenders. Despite fierce resistance and heavy casualties, the Allies secured beachheads at Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juneau, and Sword. The success of D-Day relied on meticulous planning, intelligence gathered from the French resistance, and deception operations like Operation Bodyguard, which misled the Germans into expecting attacks elsewhere. After the initial landings, the Allies faced the challenge of expanding their foothold. The Bocage terrain of Normandy favored the defenders, allowing Germans to launch counterattacks from fortified positions. Yet Allied air superiority, artillery support, and relentless logistical supply gradually overcame these obstacles. By the end of July 1944, the Allies had liberated most of northern France. The Falaise Pocket operation trapped tens of thousands of German soldiers, dealing a decisive blow to the Wehrmacht. Hitler's inability to authorize timely retreats led to catastrophic losses. The collapse of German forces in France opened the way for the liberation of Paris on August 25, signaling a decisive shift in momentum in favor of the Allies. Following Normandy, the Allies pressed forward into Belgium and the Netherlands, liberating major cities, including Brussels and Antwerp, the latter being crucial for Allied supply lines. By late 1944, German forces were retreating, but Hitler launched a desperate counteroffensive in the Ardennes, known as the Battle of the Bulge. Lasting from December 16, 1944, to January 25, 1945, it was the largest battle fought by the U.S. during the war. German forces achieved initial surprise, creating a bulge in the Allied front, but strong resistance and harsh winter conditions slowed their advance. Despite early setbacks, Allied air power, reinforcements, and secure supply lines allowed the Allies to contain the offensive and eventually push the Germans back, inflicting massive losses. With the Ardennes battle over, the Allies resumed their advance into western Germany, capturing key industrial regions of the Ruhr and clearing the path toward the heart of the Reich. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union advanced from the east, launching Operation Bagration in June 1944, which destroyed much of German Army Group Center. By early 1945, Soviet forces had liberated Poland, Romania, and much of the Baltic states, steadily pressing toward Germany. The dual pressure from east and west left Germany increasingly vulnerable, setting the stage for the final collapse of the Third Reich in 1945. By early 1945, Nazi Germany was collapsing under relentless pressure from the Allies on both the Eastern and Western fronts. Western Front. Allied forces crossed the Rhine River in March 1945, meeting limited resistance as German defenses had been severely weakened. Key cities, including Cologne and Dusseldorf, fell quickly. The Allies advanced deep into Germany, liberating Dachau and Buchenwald concentration camps, revealing the full horrors of the Holocaust to the world. Eastern Front. The Soviet Union pushed relentlessly toward Berlin, engaging in fierce battles across Poland and eastern Germany. By April 1945, Soviet troops encircled Berlin, culminating in the Battle of Berlin, one of the final and bloodiest confrontations in Europe. Hitler's final days. In his underground bunker, Adolf Hitler realized the war was lost. On April 30, 1945, Hitler committed suicide, effectively ending Nazi leadership. Germany surrendered unconditionally on May 7, 1945, and V-Day, Victory in Europe Day, was celebrated on May 8, 1945. Aftermath in Europe. Germany was divided into occupation zones controlled by the United States, the United Kingdom, the Soviet Union, and later France. The devastation across Europe was immense. Millions dead, cities destroyed, and economies shattered. Although the war in Europe had ended, fighting continued in the Pacific theater until Japan's surrender in August 1945. The War in the Pacific, 1944 to 1945, and the end of World War II. By 1944, the Allies had gained the upper hand against Japan, but the Pacific War remained fierce and costly. Island hopping strategy. The United States adopted an island hopping strategy, bypassing heavily fortified Japanese islands and capturing those of strategic importance. Key battles included Leyte Gulf, October 1944, one of the largest naval battles in history, crippling much of Japan's remaining fleet. Iwo Jima, February, March 1945, brutal fighting, remembered for the iconic raising of the American flag. Okinawa, April, June 1945, demonstrated the intensity of Japanese resistance, with massive casualties on both sides. Japanese resistance and civilian impact. Japan mobilized civilians, including kamikaze pilots, in desperate defense efforts. Major cities faced devastating firebombing campaigns, destroying large sections of Tokyo, Osaka, and other urban centers. The atomic bombs. The United States developed the atomic bomb under the Manhattan Project. August 6, 1945, Hiroshima was bombed. August 9, 1945, Nagasaki was bombed. These bombings caused immense civilian casualties and forced Japan to confront the inevitability of total defeat. Japan's surrender. Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender on August 15, 1945, VJ Day. The formal surrender occurred on September 2, 1945, aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. With this, World War II officially ended after 6 years of global conflict, leaving tens of millions dead and widespread devastation. Across Europe, Asia, and the Pacific. The post-war world and the birth of international institutions, 1945 to 1947. The conclusion of World War II dramatically transformed the global landscape, creating new powers, shifting alliances, and laying the groundwork for international cooperation. Europe after the war. Much of Europe lay in ruins, with cities, infrastructure, and economies devastated. Germany was divided into occupation zones controlled by the United States, the Soviet Union, Britain, and later France. Eastern Europe fell under Soviet influence, setting the stage for the Cold War. The Marshall Plan, 1947, provided U.S. economic aid to rebuild Western European economies and prevent the spread of communism. Trials for war crimes. The Nuremberg trials, 1945 to 1946, held Nazi leaders accountable for crimes against humanity, war crimes, and genocide. These trials established critical precedents for international law and global justice. Formation of the United Nations, 1945. Replacing the League of Nations, the UN aimed to promote peace, security, and international cooperation. Key bodies included General Assembly, all member nations have a voice. Security Council, responsible for maintaining peace, with permanent members US, USSR, Britain, France, and China. The UN also created organizations to address human rights, health, and economic development worldwide. Emergence of superpowers. With Europe weakened, the United States and the Soviet Union became the dominant global powers. Their ideological differences, capitalism versus communism, would define world politics during the Cold War. Decolonization movements begin. The war weakened European colonial powers. Countries in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East began demanding independence, setting the stage for post-war decolonization. Legacies of World War II and the foundations of the modern world, 1945 and beyond. World War II left enduring effects on global politics, economics, society, and culture. The Cold War era. Ideological rivalry between the United States, capitalism, democracy, and the Soviet Union, communism, authoritarianism, dominated global politics. Europe was divided into Western Europe aligned with the US, and Eastern Europe, aligned with the USSR. Early conflicts and tensions included Berlin blockade, 1948 to 1949. Formation of NATO, 1949, and later the Warsaw Pact, 1955. Economic reconstruction and growth. The Marshall Plan helped Western Europe recover rapidly. Japan rebuilt under U.S. guidance.